Welcome to Master Your Complexity. In today's fast-paced business landscape, software should not be a roadblock. It should be the bridge to sustainable growth and competitive advantage. In this podcast, we'll explore how IT can transform challenges into opportunities. Each episode, I'll sit down with top business and IT leaders to uncover powerful insights and practical tools that you can apply in your organization. I am Hans Canisius, CEO of USoft, and your host for this podcast. In today's episode, we're diving deep into a domain that is less familiar to many. We are going to talk about research laboratories, and in particular, advanced lab automation. We will explore what drives lab automation in the life sciences sector, the impact of AI, and especially what organizations across industries can learn from this challenging domain. I'm thrilled to have Peter Curle as my guest today. Peter is a life sciences specialist at Endava, and Peter has a wealth of experience in life sciences digitization, and I very much look forward to our discussion. Typically, we do this podcast based on thought-provoking statements, but for today, we will primarily engage in a discussion, and I very much look forward to explore together with Peter how technology fundamentally changes lab operations and what we can learn from this. Welcome, Peter, and let's get started.
Thanks, Hans, for the introduction. We're going to have an interesting conversation today. So, let's dive into the topic.
Yeah, for sure. And let me start with the first thing. So, unlike what many people think, labs are actually a true innovation playground and at the frontier of societal and technological development. Can you elaborate a bit on this based on your expertise?
Yeah, and I think that's a great starting statement. I think labs are one of those things which are hidden away in most organizations. They don't know where they are. Most people don't know what they do, but labs have been innovating, and the labs are basically the innovation hub of most organizations. And if you think historically, there's been labs around for centuries. People have been playing in their back garden, in their kitchen, doing things, and that's an early lab. So labs are part of society, they're part of how we innovate, and they innovate for themselves and they innovate for the wider society as well.
Yeah. And can you emphasize a bit on the key function of labs? Because, like you said, it's been hidden for quite a lot of people, but they drive a lot of innovation in various industries.
I think I'll first say that if you look at the industry sector, you think, well, where are labs? And labs are all around us. If we look at the life sciences in general, or just start with that one, you've got pharmaceutical companies, you've got biotech companies, you've got chemical companies, you've got agrochemical companies, you've got cosmetic companies, you've got food and health, food and well-being companies. So everybody has a lab that does something, and labs are not just one lab. Labs do multiple tasks or multiple functions throughout, and I'll call it the supply chain or the business flow of a company.
Yeah.
You've got research and development labs, which are very specific. You've got QC, QA labs. The one thing I forgot to mention, you've got hospital labs, which do a very specific task as well. So across this sector and into other sectors, you've got labs which are doing anything which are integral to all parts of the business.
Yeah.
Often they're hidden, they're in a dark corner somewhere, or they're in another building, and most people don't know what goes on in the lab.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we will definitely discuss further on in the discussion is that when you look at a laboratory, it's basically a small manufacturing supply chain facility with regards to the processes that are going on within those laboratories. So there's a great deal to learn that can be applied to different industries.
100% agree with you there, because labs have got their own ecosystem, their own drivers. But if we go back to your first question, is what's innovation? Well, innovation is the core function of a laboratory or an organization.
Yeah.
That's where, and a lab could be in a completely different and various settings, but it's very much how do you create new ideas? How do you test those ideas? How do you bring those ideas to fruition and actually, I'll say, commoditize or bring them to the wider organization slash market so that they can be used in a real life setting. So labs are integral to every business that's moving forward and is advancing.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks for setting the scene, Peter. I think that really helps. And so, if we consider laboratories, many people often see lab environments as very specific niche environments. But does that also mean that the challenges faced within this sector are unique to the lab world alone?
No, the lab world is just a microcosm of what happens in a bigger environment. And you alluded to that earlier as being this is a supply chain. Labs need raw materials coming in. They do something. A
Yeah,
result goes out, or a finished product goes out, or a finished result goes out. So, in essence, the workflow is the same as any other part of your organization. There's a full supply chain through your laboratory of how to execute and deliver the result or that the lab has been created to produce.
yeah.
So, they are no different in their organization, in their way of working than the rest of the organization. They have got specifics which are unique to the lab, but the overall process is basically the same.
Can you elaborate on some of these specifics? Uh,
In the lab, you've got you go into a lab now and you see a range of apparatus, machines, etc. So it will look quite different. It will look something out. Most people believe it's something out of a science fiction movie, but you've got automated by robots and tools now moving things around. Automation, you've got apparatus which is doing very specific tasks, i.e., they're designed to carry out a unique function, create have input into them, create data, and export that data. So you've got this fully automated looking with big instruments, small instruments that are working together, working apart, which seem to be controlled and organized by the people within the lab.
yeah.
So you've got this environment that looks different from an office, but in essence is quite the same, but it's just your machines or your apparatus look different and they behave differently. But they're all processing data
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting perspective. So the context is very specific. Like you mean, sort of the devices used and the processes that run. But on a sort of aggregate level, if you look at the fact that it's interlinked processes, infrastructure, the combination between hardware, robotics, and software, it's actually something that we see across industry, whether it's an automotive plant, whether it's an airport, whether it's a supply chain hub or a smart city or a laboratory. All these different contexts face the same challenges in terms of all this complexity that needs to be combined in a smooth running process.
100% agree with you. And I think that comparison against other industries, as we were initially talking about life sciences, is very good as well because automotive, airports, etc., they all perform very specific tasks. But ultimately, in this modern world that we live in, it's managing data and managing information flows between various systems that you're running,
Yeah.
having integrated systems that talk to each other and are able to process the data quickly and efficiently.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you're touching upon right now is what we see across industry, this increasing need for process orchestration and automation technology. So, technology that helps organizations sort of manage much more efficiently and effectively this entire interlinking process of ongoing data flows, devices, infrastructure. And what you're saying is that there's actually very strong parallel to the lab automation sphere as well.
Exactly. And I think if you were to walk into a lab, you'll see every apparatus might have a different manufacturer's name on it.
Yeah.
It's You've got very specific tools, machines, apparatus that can do very specific jobs. You go to the next part of the bench, you've got another manufacturer doing something with an apparatus doing something
Yeah.
slightly different or completely different. So you've got this multitude of suppliers coming into your lab from the basic, I'll call it the infrastructure of your lab, i.e., what does your lab do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you've got your specific suppliers of apparatus, your specific suppliers of IT systems, of software solutions, And ultimately, the challenge now is how do you integrate all of those different systems so that you have a fully functional, efficient laboratory which is able to process or able to perform the tasks you want quickly and efficiently, but also reproduce those results or reproduce those activities day in, day out, so that it's a reproducibility, efficiency, and that leads on to auditability so that you can check, has the lab performed as it's been designed to do?
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. And I think maybe a sort of follow-up question that I have, especially for listeners that are less familiar to the sort of laboratory domain and especially lab automation. Can you provide a brief sort of deep dive example, for instance, in the agrochemical part? What do you see? You already mentioned that a lab is different, but it's different than a manufacturing plant or something else. But so what would people experience?
I think agrochemical is a very interesting industry. Most people think, well, you produce a seed and it grows. But actually, what goes into that is really interesting. Well, from my perspective, is really interesting. And the technology and the ideas which are being explored. We've got one client that we're working with, and the lab has become a building. It's you can go into a building which is divided into zones, and these are the size of a football park.
Wow.
Uh, but each zone is a different climatic region, and you can change the climatic region within that zone. So you can walk into one zone and it's a rainforest. You walk into the next door and it's a dry desert environment.
Wow.
And these are just separated by a slim wall with a door between them. But you've got a lot of technology which moves plants through robotics, through conveyor belts, etc., through these environments. And then once they're actually wanting to analyze what they're doing with them, they've got cameras that can take 360-degree photographs and monitor the growth of these plants. Then they're taking them out fully automated through a conveyor belt system,
Yeah.
and then they're X-raying the root growth patterns. And you're thinking, X-raying plants to monitor root growth in environmental conditions. That's science fiction to most people.
Yes, so
Right.
you're painting a picture of basically a manufacturing facility, but on a level that many industries are still not yet on.
Correct. Most laboratories are quite small in the corner type places, or they're specific to specific tasks. But this is an industrial scale environment where you're monitoring environment, and then you start to think about it. It's not just the machines within that are used in the lab, but you've got all your SCADA systems, i.e., what are you tracking from the environment within where you're working? All of that data and information, and that brings it straight back to where we started off. The lab is a microcosm of a manufacturing facility.
Yeah.
You've got X number of sensors picking up information that are temperature controlling, humidity controlling, et cetera, within specific labs. You've got labs which are vacuumed or unvacuumed. You've got pressure zones between labs as well. So the sensors which are tracking all that information are vital to the running of the lab as well. And that's where the manufacturing integration, comes in as well.
Yeah, I think that's really key, right? Because if we would place ourselves in a lab environment, then measuring everything that's going on is key as part of that research process. So I think when we talk about smart logistics concepts or smart city or smart building concepts, we are moving into a direction where you measure everything. But for a lab environment, this has been basic practice for decades.
Not all labs use this as really advanced technology. The standard lab that you'll find in a pharmaceutical company or something, it's just another room which there are certain things, but there are environmental controls as well. But
Yeah.
you can go to that level of complexity and sophistication that everything is tracked within that lab. Everything is controlled so that you're fully aware of all aspects of what are happening, and you can track if there's any errors, deviations. Potentially it's a temperature flux, potentially it's a open window. Oh, sorry, you don't get open windows most of the time, but a door that's been left open accidentally for longer, and the temperature goes up and down in a temperature-controlled environment. So those are the sorts of things which are automatically tracked as well now.
Yeah, I think this really helps because I think many people think of a laboratory in a sense of people doing some tests and getting some results and documenting those. But this example really makes it clear that this domain of laboratories is expanding to very complex manufacturing facilities.
Exactly, and you can almost argue that the manufacturing facility is an extension of your lab.
Yeah, yeah,
Because you're pulling in information, especially if you go into pharmaceutical manufacturing sites, you're looking at the MES systems for manufacturing execution. You're pulling in all that information which goes into this is the information related to this lot where you have done some lab tests on. So all that information ultimately becomes part of the final dossier of what labs or manufacturing sites are doing.
yeah. And so, Peter, so if we build on this example, right, what are the key learnings from the lab world that can provide particular insightful insights for organizations in other industries? What can they learn from this?
I think you can start to look at your lab as and labs are basically innovation centers. They are pushing the boundaries, and that's what their initial. You can. I'll go back and say labs have got different functions. You've got your innovation labs, which are pushing boundaries, creating, investigating ideas, etc. You've got quality control labs, which are making sure that your processes are working correctly, your finished product which you're producing is being produced to the standard it is required, and that starts to integrate regulatory control into it as well. And you've got other labs which are there just to give you a result which will allow you to make a step to the next stage. So there's a variety of laboratory functions, but they all follow the same basic principle, is that you document what you're going to do, you execute to the documentation that you've developed, and then you check your result.
Yeah,
And you make sure it's repeatable, auditable, and uh, as to a standard that's acceptable for your organization.
yeah,
And that's actually, and the one thing that I think that most people don't realize, that that is for most organizations a risk mitigation activity. You're mitigating the risk that you have not made an error in something that you are doing, whether it's innovation and quality control. And that's a basic principle that you can apply across any part of the organization.
yeah,
You you have a process, you follow the process, and you mitigate the risk so that you're either accepting a set level of risk or not accepting that risk. And that's what all organizations ultimately do, is mitigate risks so that they mitigate the risk to their clients, to their customers, or to in the life science industry, to their patients.
yeah. I really like that line of thought. So, I mean, from from an outside perspective, we see a lot of businesses across sectors uh, basically being challenged by the digital ambition to connect the physical world in terms of infrastructure and devices and sensors, and the non-physical world, the data world, and doing that in a way that provides performance, accuracy, and, like you say, repeatability. So to manage your risks and to manage the outcome. And I think one of the additional things that laboratories have to face is that when you look at regulatory control and auditability, it's a few levels up from many commercial activities. So this melting pot of challenges actually is at a sort of hyper level within laboratories, and especially advanced examples that you provided, and therefore a very good example for organizations across industries to learn from, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point. Labs don't do anything, I'll say, undocumented.
Yeah,
They don't, they even in innovation labs, they document what they're going to do.
yeah,
They they don't just come in on a Monday morning and go, "Well, let's do A, B, and C today, and let's see what happens." It's still a very structured process that they go through so that they can understand what they have done and what the results are telling them.
Yeah.
So structure and organization within the laboratory environment is key. It's historic. I'll go. When I started, we had a lab notebook. When I was in the lab, you wrote down what you were going to do, and you followed that, and you recorded your results, all in paper and pen. That's all you had.
Yeah.
Now we live in the digital world, and the digital world is accelerating. We've got various tools, software applications, etc., that
Yeah.
allow us to be much more flexible and increased levels of automation, digitalization. But the principle is still the same.
Yeah.
We write down what we're going to do and we record the result. That fundamental principle has not changed in the laboratory world for centuries.
And so this brings a sort of question to my mind, which we haven't discussed. But so if you look at it from this perspective, then I think other industries can especially learn from the lab environment in its continuous focus on innovation, which is something that we all want, but that under continuous and strict control and traceability requirements. So basically, it's just, like I said, it's a sort of hyper level of what we face in everyday business. So why is it that organizations don't look towards fully automated labs as a sort of um, inspiration for their own business?
I think there's several reasons for that. One, it's I think a fault lies with the lab environment itself. Uh, they've always said we are special, we're different, we need to work in our own little area. We are the lab. Give us our space and we will do it. And it's something, prepare. Well, we're scientists, we know what we're doing, which is a little bit of a misnomer sometimes. But it's really much it's very much, "Oh, give them their apparatus, give them their space, and they will do something," and there's never been the pushback, either from the lab environment to say, "Actually, we're part of the business."
Yeah.
And that's something I was always in my career, I've always been curious about, is this fragmentation of business process. Um, Labs do this, finance do that, marketing does something else,
Yeah.
uh, manufacturing does something, but they all depend upon each other. They're all integral. Uh, but we're starting to de-silo organizations, and that's where the big drive. That's one of the drives of digitalization is. It's allowing access to data, access to information across multiple platforms for virtually anybody within the organization who has the authority or has the interest to look at it.
Yeah.
And that's where the lab environment, by saying, well, we've been doing this for X number of years. Come and listen to us. Come and look at what we're doing
Yeah.
and see if you can learn something from us. And we can learn something from you as well.
Yeah.
Digitalization is demystifying the boundaries between different aspects of the business.
That is nicely put. And I think so. One of the things that is really interesting for me is that so you're an expert within this domain. For me, this is fairly new. What I like to see, for instance, in the joint collaboration that we've done for one of our customers in life sciences, is that with some very good technology, you're able to increase efficiency by 10 times and reducing error margins by 80%, which is very impressive in an extremely innovative environment. And I think, I mean, for me personally, looking at the experience that I have in other industries as well, there's a lot of takeaways that you can have as, like we mentioned, a manufacturing, a supply chain company, or an airport, or a city, from this lab automation domain that you can apply in your own context very well.
I think the lab environment gives you that concealed environment where you can do this on a relatively small scale
Yeah,
quickly. Your labs are not multiple buildings across multiple sites. Although you have labs in each site, they're often very self-contained. They're obviously they've got specific automation tools, which are basically robotics, which they buy from a big robotics company, but they do very specific things. They've got specific sets of apparatus which do very specific scientific things, but they need to be integrated with the next machine down the line.
Yeah.
The data that you have, if you don't have data integration between your apparatus, it's a waste of time investing money in new apparatus because you've got so many manual processes that require human intervention every 5-10 minutes maybe,
Yeah.
that the risk of error starts to multiply every time you bring the human into the equation. Now, I'm not saying that humans are bad, because humans are actually, we need to control the lab and you need that human intervention.
Yeah.
But we should look back and say humans control and humans make decisions, but we shouldn't be doing manual tasks, which are simple manual tasks where we can multiply the risk of an error happening.
Yeah.
And that's where automation and integration can be really useful within a lab.
Yeah, I think we've got a specific part of our discussion focused on the human in the loop part as well. But
Yes.
so if we move on to what's to come, so the lab of the future, what are the key elements that will dominate future laboratories?
I think that's exactly the same question of what's going to dominate business at this moment in time, and it's going to be the use of AI. And I'm not saying that AI will take over everything, but within the lab environment, AI will start to ask very specific questions. It will be used to resolve very specific issues which are constrained.
Yeah.
And it will move from, the world is now talking about generative AI, but if you look at a lot of the predictions for 25 and beyond, we're talking about agentic or multiple agent AI.
Yeah.
And that's where AI starts to behave like a team of human beings, i.e., you've got different agents which are allowed to do different tasks,
Yeah.
but they're constrained in what they can do. They can't just randomly do certain things, they have limits placed on them. They're allowed to have reflection and discussion between the agents. And if they can't find a solution, they put their hand up and say, "We don't know what the answer is." And you can then prompt and do something else. So that's what's happening within business, but within the lab world, that will allow almost seamless integration between a lot of the physical elements that you have in the lab and also then the data elements which are being created.
Yeah.
And you will be able to start off small and say, we want to solve problem X in the lab.
Yeah.
You can't just go into the lab and say, let's just throw AI at it. It won't work. Everybody realizes that AI has limitations.
Yeah.
You have to start small and identify a specific use case that will allow you to solve a specific problem within a constrained environment. Then you build out as you start to gain experience with what that is telling you and what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because not everything will work. That's the beauty of innovation, is that you learn by failing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think,
That's
yeah, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
and that's what the lab is there to do. The
Yeah.
lab is there to learn by failure.
Yeah. And I like that sort of synergy that you described between the AI technology that's booming right now and the human in the loop. Because one of the sort of final questions that I had looking at these future labs and also the rise of AI is that with AI and automation taking over routine tasks, how can we safeguard human creativity and critical thinking? Uh,
I think that's the humans are born. We are born to think and be creative.
yeah.
If there's always going to be a creative individual who comes along with a new idea.
Yeah.
There's always going to be somebody who thinks, maybe we can do this a different way or something. That's part of our DNA. That's something that we do automatically, be it on a very simple scale or a very big scale. So I don't think we'll lose, if we start to lose that drive to be creative, then the end of the human race is coming very quickly. Maybe that's a bit pessimistic, but we are creatures of intuition, and creativity. That's what we are. We have a level of curiosity that drives us.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get to a medium where we've got a balance between the use of AI and the use of humans.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, in a lab environment, especially in a regulated lab environment, we are still at the stage where humans have to make the decisions.
Yeah.
Humans make the yes, no decision points. Humans make the final, agree on the final analysis. Is this result correct? Yes or no? Can we accept this result? Yes or no? Currently, within a regulated environment, we do not allow AI or a technology to make those, I'll say, critical decision points for us. And
Yeah.
I don't think humans want to get to the point where a technology will automatically make all of those decisions. I don't think we will be able to trust AI or technology to do that for a long time. But we still need to be very much in the loop where there are critical decision points to be made, yes or no. We take the information that's being presented to us, but we still have to say, yes, I agree with that, and I tick the box, create a signature of whatever we do in a regulated environment and say, we have agreed with this result, and this is what this is the decision point that we have taken.
And I think, I mean, this is really something that I personally like a lot within this digitization space that we're in, is that how can you create a balance between technology, very much AI driven, and the humans, in order to have people within your organization doing the stuff that makes a real difference, and making sure that all the things that can be automated are automated to the full extent, but making sure that at critical moments where there's sort of human oversight or critical decision making, you have the right people with the right skill set and the attention to detail, and focus to make those decisions and move your business forward.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. It's if we start to remove humans from decision making,
Yeah.
we then go into a very gray area is where does responsibility lie?
Yeah.
Where is the accountability?
Yeah.
So it's a great example is football. We've got VAR in football.
Yeah.
Is it the technology which is saying that's a goal and not a goal, or is it the human who is saying actually that was a penalty and it's not a penalty, or that was a goal? So the the technology gives the referee information, but the final it's the humans who still have to make that decision. They still control the game.
Yeah, and I think that is sort of an important key takeaway, and I see that you see this in a lot of discussions about the current rise of AI. Is that how can you balance technology with structural and solid human in the loop processes to make sure that this sort of synergy is exploited to the full extent without excessive risks. And I think that's one of the key focus areas for AI innovation for the upcoming few years.
Yeah, I think finding that balance is the next big challenge for us. The AI will continue to accelerate very quickly,
Yeah.
but finding that balance of where human and AI interact and where decisions are made and how we make those decisions,
Yeah.
that's the next challenge for us to make sure we have the right information and we make the decisions in full transparency and openness so that they are visible to the wider world.
Yeah. And again, what I really like is that this is again a topic that applies for lab automation for laboratories, but it applies across industries as well. So what I really like in this conversation that we're having is that it's a very innovative domain. A lot is happening there. Maybe in some lab environments, they're already quite far ahead compared to other industries. So it's a sort of inspiration ground as well. But there are a lot of parallels that apply across industry. And I think interesting learnings that other organizations can take away from laboratories and advanced lab automation initiatives and apply within their own businesses to help digitize in the upcoming years.
Definitely. The lab environment is ultimately it's not unique to the industry it works in. The fundamentals and the business practices that it's challenging can be looked at by any industry. They can gain knowledge, understand these are the things which are potentially happening in a innovative but controlled way.
Yeah.
These are process automation from at a physical and a digital level as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But always with humans fully involved in making those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. And what's I think really interesting for me, and I hope for the listeners as well, is that your experience within this domain, but your view across industries, uh, can hopefully help listeners to apply some of the learnings from lab automation into other domains as well. Yeah,
Correct. It's even within big organizations, you can infuse that knowledge across the organization, but then transfer it across industries.
yeah,
Uh, industries are, I think industries are learning that you don't actually have to stay within your own industry to find a best practice.
luckily we see organizations learn and open up much more to other sectors and apply those best practices. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would say up until the end of the last century, it was industries were very siloed. We do this. Don't tell us what you're doing because we're experts in this. We've spent hundreds of 20, 30, 40 years developing this. We know what we're doing. Now, the digitalization, the digital world is breaking down those barriers. So
for sure.
industries need to learn from each other because the problems are fundamentally the same.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And Peter, I'd really like to thank you for this conversation of today. I think and I hope that we've inspired listeners to look at other industries and especially also to the advanced lab automation domain, and learn from what's going on there and how you could apply those learnings into your own businesses. Um,
And I would put a challenge to companies who run labs, open them up and show them to other companies,
yep,
show them to other industries.
yep,
Don't be, obviously you keep your IP and your knowledge, but don't be afraid to display how good you are at certain things and export that knowledge across to other industries because there will be payback eventually to your industry as well.
yeah. I really like that. I hope that somewhere soon we'll have a sort of a joint event somewhere where we bring in different industries into a lab environment and share learnings.
Great.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Uh, that's sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
No, I was just going to say thanks, Hans.
Yeah,
Very well.
I really enjoyed this conversation. That's it for this episode of Master Your Complexity. Again, a big thanks to Peter for sharing his insights and expertise in this area with us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't hesitate to subscribe and leave a remark and follow us on LinkedIn because it will help us to reach out to other leaders like yourselves. My name is Hans Canisius, and this is Master Your Complexity. See you at the next episode. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Hans.